Tonight, let your mind drift far from the modern world, away from the glowing screens, the noise of traffic, and the weight of restless thoughts. Travel with me now across time and silence to the warm sands of ancient Egypt. We find ourselves in the sacred city of Thebes, around 1240 BCE, during the golden reign of Pharaoh Ramses the Great. Here, beside the slow-flowing Nile, where date palms sway in the morning breeze, a new day begins. The sky above the city still holds the stars. Orion shines brightly overhead, the constellation known to the Egyptians as Sa, the soul of the god Osiris. The horizon glows gently with the first hint of dawn. In a quiet brick home near the temple quarter, a woman stirs from her sleep. Her name is Neferet. In the old tongue, her name means beautiful, but her renown lies not in appearance or status. She is a perfumer, one of the finest in Thebes. Her craft is both art and ritual. With oils, resins, and blossoms, she makes offerings not only to nobles and royals, but to the gods and the honored dead. In this world, scent is sacred. Fragrance accompanies both birth and burial. Neferet's work touches both the realm of the living and the land beyond. As the sky slowly brightens, she rises from her woven mat. She wraps herself in a simple linen tunic, soft with years of wear. The clay floor is cool beneath her bare feet as she crosses the small inner courtyard. A tall clay jar stands in the corner, filled with water drawn from the Nile the evening before. She washes her face, arms, and hands in silence. These early hours are not for speech. She steps out beneath the fading stars, inhaling deeply. The air still carries the softness of night, a calmness that disappears by midnight. She lifts her eyes toward the heavens, offering a quiet prayer to Isis for wisdom, for strength, and for the steady hand needed in her craft. Around her, the city remains hushed, but it won't last long. Soon, Thebes will awaken in full, boatmen calling across the river, merchants opening their stalls, temple priests preparing the morning incense. For now, she enjoys the stillness. A small oil lamp flickers inside her workshop. Shelves line the clay walls holding jars and bundles of ingredients, thick oils of moringa, and castor-powdered myrrh flakes of resin, wrapped in linen slivers of precious wood brought by caravan cedar from the Levant, cinnamon from lands far to the south. Each scent has its own power, each recipe its own meaning. At the center of the room stands a low work table. On it rest her tools, a stone mortar and pestle, a bronze blade for cutting roots and bark, a glazed alabaster jar ready to be filled. Neferet sits and begins to grind a small lump of frankincense. The resin, once hardened from a desert tree's sap, is now crushed slowly, patiently. She adds a few drops of blue lotus oil. The scent is deep, almost intoxicating. Slowly, carefully, she mixes it into a warmed base of beeswax and castor oil. The scent rises gently, filling the air, not overpowering, but soft and persistent. Her cat, Seshat, named for the goddess of writing and wisdom, weaves around her ankles and purrs. Neferet pauses to offer a scrap of dried fish left over from the previous evening. The cat accepts the gift with quiet dignity before curling in a corner to sleep again. This blend she is making today is a temple formula and offering for Hathor, goddess of beauty, music, and joy. It will be delivered just after sunrise by a young boy from the temple staff. Neferet works in silence. Her fingers are steady, her motions deliberate. There is no rush. In her craft, haste is the enemy of perfection. She pours the finished perfume, now golden and thickened, to a small alabaster vessel, then seals it with a linen cloth and resin. The smell lingers in the air even after she sets the jar aside. Outside, the city begins to stir. A donkey brays somewhere in the distance. A woman's voice calls softly to her children. Far off, a reed flute begins to play. The sky brightens, from deep blue to soft violet. Then Sardinia, line of gold, breaks over the eastern horizon. The sun has risen. Light spills slowly over the city's mud brick walls, illuminating the palm trees, the temples, the tiled roofs, and the distant river. Neferet shields her eyes as the sunlight pours into her courtyard. The heat will come swiftly now, but with the morning light also comes energy, movement, and purpose. In a few moments, her apprentice Dia will arrive. She is a quiet girl of 12, recently taken in to learn the trade. Neferet has grown fond of her, though she rarely shows it with words. The girl watches everything, and she learns quickly. Neferet's basket is nearly full, 3 jars for the temple, 1 for a noblewoman's household, and 1 small violin, experimental blend for her own enjoyment. She smells it again before sealing it. Notes of lotus, acacia, and a trace of dried orange rind. Something new, something hers. She places the jars in the basket with care, padding them with cloth. Soon, they will be carried off into the streets of Thebes, where buyers wait, priests prepare ceremonies, and life continues beneath the watchful eyes of the gods. But in this moment, all is still. The sun is rising, the perfumes are made, and the city wakes slowly around her. Neferet stands in the doorway, arms folded, watching the light touch the tops of the temple pylons in the distance. Beyond them lie the tombs of kings, carved into the western cliffs, the land of the dead. Here, in the living city, her hands continue a tradition older than memory, a craft passed from mother to daughter, master to apprentice, generation after generation. The scents she prepares today may linger in tombs for thousands of years, but for now, their beauty is simply part of the morning air. The sun climbs gently over the horizon, casting a soft, golden glow across the walls of Thebes. Dust floats lazily in the warm light, catching the shimmer of dawn. In the heart of the city, sounds begin to stir, faint voices, sandals brushing against sand-smooth stone, the low creak of wooden shutters opening. Neferet steps outside with her reed basket balanced carefully in her arms, her alabaster jars nestled inside, wrapped tightly in linen. She walks with practiced ease, head held high, her white linen dress fluttering slightly in the breeze. The scent of frankincense still clings to her skin and tunic, gentle and persistent, a mark of her trade. Her feet move over sun-baked stone, worn smooth by centuries of steps. The path ahead curves gently toward the central avenue, a wide, processional road lined with columns and sphinx, leading toward the temple of Amun-Ra. But Neferet does not go that way yet. First, she takes the quiet street behind the potter's stalls, where the air is still cool and shaded. Thebes is fully awake now, but it breathes slowly. A boy runs past, laughing, his hands sticky with honeyed bread. A woman with copper earrings sweeps the dust from her threshold. Old men sit outside under a canopy of woven reeds, sipping barley beer and watching the morning unfold. The city pulses with life, yet there is no rush. Time stretches out like the nylon winding, inevitable. Neferet greets a weaver at his stall, nods politely to a sandal maker, and pauses to admire a basket of pomegranates set out by a cheerful fruit seller. He offers her one, and she accepts it with a quiet thank you. The fruit is firm, its skin deep red. She will save it for her apprentice, Tia, who adores their sweetheart juice. Children chase each other past her ankles. A goat bleats somewhere in the distance. The smell of baking barley loaves drifts from an oven nearby, rich and nutty, mingling with the scent of the river, the dust, the heat-soaked stone. These are the layers of Thebes, a living mosaic of sound and smell and texture. She moves onward. The temple of Hathor is not far now, just beyond the street of scribes. As she walks, she passes murals painted on walls, vibrant images of gods and kings, of harvests and offerings, faded slightly by time but still proud. One scene shows Hathor herself, wearing her crown of horns and sun disk, surrounded by dancers and musicians. It is to this goddess that Neferet brings her perfumes to the offerings, to be used in ritual, in celebration, and in devotion. The temple rises before her, its gates flanked by tall columns carved with lotus capitals. Priests and attendants move about the courtyard in quiet preparation. The sound of chanting drifts through the air, soft and rhythmic. A scent of burning resin already curls from within the inner sanctum. Neferet is greeted by a temple servant, a young man named Paheri, who has worked here for years. He knows her well and offers a respectful nod. She hands him the basket, listing its contents with quiet precision. 2 jars of blue lotus and cedar for morning rites, 1 of frankincense and cinnamon for burial incense, 1 of myrrh and honey to be used during sacred dances. The 5th jar, her newest blend, she sets aside. A gift, she says simply. Paheri smiles and promises it will be presented to the high priestess. They exchange few words, as is the custom. Perfume, like prayer, speaks for itself. With her deliveries complete, Neferet does not rush home. Instead, she lingers in the shaded portico near the temple's garden. A fountain trickles softly nearby, and beyond it grow sycamores and tamarisk trees, their leaves fluttering in the breeze. A pair of temple cats weave between the shrubs, tails high. She sits on a low stone bench and closes her eyes. The breeze carries the scent of incense, soft, clean, ancient. It mingles with the garden's greenery, creating a calming blend of sacred and earthly. This moment is a gift. The city hums quietly beyond the temple walls, but here, in this space, time seems to hold its breath. After a while, she hears footsteps and opens her eyes. A familiar figure approaches an older woman in richly pleated linen, adorned with a belt of carnelian beads. It is Lady Hennet, a noblewoman, a longtime patron. She smiles warmly and joins Neferet on the bench. They speak in low voices, exchanging pleasantries. News of the court, the markets, the rising Nile. Then Hennet leans in slightly, lowering her voice, and speaks of a coming ceremony and offering for the goddess Mut in the Western Temple. She requests a custom perfume, something new and unusual, something bold, she says, but not overpowering. Neferet listens closely. Her mind is already sorting through ingredients: cistus and juniper, perhaps balanced with lily and a trace of She agrees to create it by the end of the week. They part with a clasp of hands, and Neferet walks slowly back through the garden, thoughtful and composed. She returns home by a different route, taking the narrow streets near the river. The sun is higher now, and the heat has begun to settle over the city. Baskets of dates and onions line the path. Fishermen haul their catch from reed boats, their hands glistening with water and scales. A pair of musicians pluck at harps near the embankment, their tune bright and cheerful. She passes a woman crushing herbs with a pestle outside her door, humming softly to herself. All around her, Thebes is alive and moving, but Neferet walks within it like a calm current beneath a noisy surface. She carries the silence of her craft with her, the dignity of her art, the quiet strength of someone who shapes the invisible. By the time she reaches home, the courtyard is warm, and a cat sachet has stretched out in the shade beneath the fig tree. Neferet steps inside, washes her hands again with cool water, and prepares to begin the second part of her day. There is still much to do. Oils to blend, roots to dry, new formulas to record on scrolls. Tia will arrive soon. Together they will grind and heat, pour and seal, whisper and learn. But for this brief moment, as the sunlight filters through palm leaves and a breeze stirs the hanging linen curtain, Neferet sits quietly. The air smells of resin and earth, and the world, for now, is still. The shadow shifts slowly across the courtyard floor as the sun rises higher, softening the blue of early morning into the pale gold of mid-morning light. Neferet remains seated for a few moments longer, enjoying the quiet rhythm of her breath and the faint whisper of palm leaves above. But soon, she hears the gentle patter of footsteps just beyond the outer gate, followed by the soft creak of the wooden door. Tia, her apprentice, enters with her head slightly bowed, her braids swinging against her linen dress. She greets Neferet with a whisper, places her small leather pouch on the workbench, and sets to her tasks without being told. There is no need for instruction. The girl already knows the order of the day. First, she prepares the coals for the perfume, still small lumps of charcoal arranged beneath a bronze vessel. Then she unwraps bundles of dried herbs and places them on the shelf in careful order. Crushed lily petals, powdered myrrh, fennel seeds. Neferet watches her for a moment, then joins her at the bench. Their silence is comfortable, the kind born of long hours spent in shared purpose. Though Tia is still young, there is grace in her hands and a deep quiet in her spirit. She does not fidget, does not chatter. She listens, she observes. These are rare traits in one so young, and Neferet sees in her the makings of a true perfumer. Together they begin the next blender request from a midwife in the Western Quarter. It is a soothing balm meant for new mothers, designed to ease swelling and lift the mood after birth. Neferet begins by warming castor oil over the coals, while Tia grinds dried chamomile and rose petals into fine powder. The scent is light and floral, touched with earth. Neferet adds honey to the oil, thick and golden, and then a few drops of moringa extract. As the mixture simmers, the air becomes rich with warmth and sweetness. Tia stirs carefully, watching the bubbles rise, her brow furrowed in concentration. Neferet nods approvingly. She remembers her own early years, how long it took to sense when an oil had heated enough without burning, how many batches spoiled before the hand learned what the eye could not see. When the balm is ready, they pour it into shallow clay pots and leave them to cool on the shaded side of the workroom. Tia labels each with a reed pen on slips of papyrus. Her handwriting still clumsy but improving. Neferet walks to the rear of the house, where a small room stays cool even in the height of summer. The walls are thick, the windows small and high. It is here that she stores her most precious ingredients, resins from Punt, imported oils, and rare blossoms wrapped in linen. She steps into the cool dimness, letting her eyes adjust. On a shelf to the right are alabaster jars, each sealed with wax and marked with symbols of their contents. Kifi for temple offerings, lily resin, juniper tar, sacred balm made once a year during the festival of Opet. She removes a small jar from the back of the shelf, an old formula of her own design, one she hasn't used in months. She twists the linen seal loose and lifts the lid. The scent inside is bold and deep notes of crushed acacia, fig sap, and a smoky hint of labdanum. It is darker than her usual blends, more sensual, almost brooding. She made it once for a dancer who performed for the nobles during the Feast of the Valley. The dancer had worn it on her skin and in her hair, and it had lingered in the room long after the music stopped. Neferet closes the jar and returns it to its place. Not today, she thinks, but soon. Returning to the workshop, she finds Tia sitting in the doorway, sketching something on a small shard of pottery, practicing hieroglyphs. By the look of it, Neferet does not interrupt. She lets the girl work while she prepares ingredients for her next commission, a burial balm. A young scribe from the temple of Khonsu has died unexpectedly, and his family has ordered traditional anointing oils to be applied before mummification. These are somber, blends thick, resinous, and heavy with spiritual weight. Myrrh is the base, dark and bitter, combined with cedarwood and crushed juniper berries. She adds cinnamon bark, then seals the jar with a layer of beeswax. This mixture will preserve more than flesh. It is a fragrance meant for the journey between worlds, a protective veil between life and the afterlife. Neferet prepares it with reverence, aware that it will touch her body in its final earthly moments. The weight of this knowledge never leaves her. Her work is not merely cosmetic, it is sacred. It is remembrance. It is a way to speak to the gods when words fall silent. As the sun climbs to its zenith, the shadows retreat, and heat wraps itself around the house like a thick cloth. Neferet opens the woven shutters to let the breeze in. Outside, the city hums beneath the weight of noon. Vendors call in the streets, children splash in basins of water, and priests chant in temple courts, their voices lost beneath the drone of cicadas. The clay walls of her home hold the scent of the morning's labor blue lotus, honey, chamomile, and myrrh. It is a complex perfume now, not one she bottled or measured, but a lingering atmosphere of her day. Tia begins to tidy the space. She folds linens, scrubs the mortar clean, and sets the empty jars in a basin of water. Neferet helps her without words. Together they move through their small rituals, cleaning, sorting, preparing for the next round of work. There is comfort in this rhythm. It is the heartbeat of her life. She has lived many such days and hopes for many more. As the last of the bomb cools and the jars are neatly stacked in the shade, Neferet allows herself a moment of rest. She sits on a stool near the doorway and watches the city beyond. The Nile glints in the distance. A palm frond sways in the hot breeze. Sashat the cat pads across the courtyard and curls beneath her chair. The light has changed. The morning is gone. But the work remains, always. The afternoon deepens with a hush that settles over the city like silk. Thebes is quieter now. The sun, high in the sky, casts stark shadows between the pillars and clay walls, while the Nile glimmers with lazy ripples beyond the rooftops. Inside Neferet's home, the air is heavy with the weight of heat and the soft breath of incense. A single charcoal brazier burns in the corner, releasing a faint spiral of smoke scented with lemongrass and galbanum cooling aromas to balance the summer air. Tia has gone for the day, leaving the workshop silent and still. Neferet moves through the quiet with slow steps, her sandals brushing softly against the polished floor of packed earth and stone. She enters the inner room of the house, the room with the carved pillars and the low alabaster shelves where she keeps the sacred oils. These are not for the markets, nor for noble women's vanity. These are reserved for the divine, for gods and spirits, temples and tombs. Here, she stores kifi, the sacred compound of more than a dozen ingredients: honey, raisins, wine, myrrh, frankincense, cinnamon, juniper berries, and roots boiled slowly into a thick, dark paste. then shaped into pellets and dried in linen powder. It is said that the gods themselves breathe it in the afterlife. The priests of Amun burn it at sunset to invite the gods' favor and bring dreams that carry messages from beyond. Neferet selects a packet of kifi and places it in a bronze bowl. She lights it with a reed dipped in oil and watches the smoke curl upward, gray and fragrant, carrying prayers into the air. The smell is deep, warm, and almost hypnotic, resin and sweetness, sharp herbs and smooth fruit. It fills the room slowly, and she lets it wrap around her, close her eyes, and breathe it deeply. This is the scent of stillness, of memory, of something older than speech. It reminds her of the temple she visited as a child, holding her mother's hand, of the first time she knelt before a statue of Isis and smelled the offerings laid at her feet. As the smoke rises, Neferet unrolls a scroll on the table nearby. It is a record of blends formulas passed down from her teacher and notes she has added over the years. The ink has faded in places, the edges curled from time and use. Some recipes are practical: balms for cracked skin, oils to keep linen supple, salves for sunburn. Others are more poetic: to calm the heart, to welcome the moon, to remember one who has passed. She traces one line with her finger. It reads, "For the breath of Hathor, rose, wine, honey, and blue lotus steeped in cedar." She remembers creating it for a festival. The way the temple halls echoed with music and the dancers' hair was sweet with the perfume as they spun in offering. Neferet returns the scroll to its place and begins gathering ingredients for a new formula. She has been thinking about it since morning, ever since Lady Hennet's request in the garden. Something new, something bold, but it must still honor the gods. She begins with spikenard musky and green, grounding, then a touch of cassia, warm and sharp, like sunlight on stone. She crushes dried jasmine flowers and adds a few drops of blue lotus oil, a scent of water and dreams. The base is unguent of moringa, which she heats gently until it softens. She works slowly, not by measurement but by memory and instinct, adjusting the balance as the scent builds layer by layer. This is the part she loves most, the quiet dialogue between hands and scent, between memory and imagination. When it is done, she places the mixture in a clean alabaster jar and seals it. She writes nothing on the lid yet. It has no name, only presence. She sets it aside to rest and cool. The smell lingers on her fingers, and she does not mind. It follows her as she steps outside into the quiet courtyard. The light is golden now, beginning to soften as the day edges toward evening. She pours a cup of cool water from a clay jug and sits beneath the fig tree, where Sashat the cat has returned and sprawled, content. The breeze carries hints of the river in the city beyond faint voices, the creak of boats, the flap of linen drying on a rooftop. Thebes is timeless in these hours. The city feels both ancient and alive, as if the past is not something gone but something that walks beside the present. Neferet thinks of the other perfumers who once lived in these same streets, of the nameless women who pressed flowers into oil 100 years ago, whose hands she will never know, but whose art she carries on. She thinks of the offerings burned before shrines long turned to dust, of prayers whispered into perfume that lingered in the air long after the bodies were gone. Her work is not new. It is part of a river of memory, flowing backward and forward, scented with smoke and oil and time. She sits until the shadows grow longer, watching the movement of light on the walls, the flutter of palm fronds above. The air has cooled slightly. The cicadas begin their song. Soon it will be time to prepare for the evening, perhaps another small batch of balm, perhaps a walk to the river to gather fresh herbs from the garden near the scribe's house. But for now, Neferet stays still. The jar of new perfume rests on the shelf inside. The smoke of kifi still curls faintly in the air. And in this quiet hour between light and dark, between labor and rest, she feels her craft settle around her like a second skin sila, sacred, enduring. As the sky begins to shift from gold to rose, and the warm breath of the day fades into the hush of evening, Neferet wraps herself in a fresh linen shawl and steps out into the city. Thebes glows in the light of the setting, sun walls painted orange, shadows long and soft. The streets are quieter now, the heat lifting from the ground in gentle waves. The market stalls are closing, children are being called home, and the river gleams like polished obsidian as dusk deepens. Neferet walks with calm purpose, a small alabaster jar tucked beneath her arm and a palm-wrapped bundle of dried lotus in her other hand. She is headed to the temple of Hathor, as she does each seventh evening, to make an offering in silence. The temple sits just beyond the edge of the central quarter, near the fields of papyrus and the small houses of dancers and musicians. Its walls are not grand like those of Amun's great temple, but it is graceful, carved with delicate reliefs of music and love, of joy and birth. Hathor is the goddess of beauty and fragrance, of women and sweetness, of song and laughter. She is the one Neferet honors above all, for it is said that she was born from the perfumed breath of Ra, that the scent of her hair could calm storms, that her temples were scented so richly that the gods themselves would visit. As Neferet approaches the temple gate, she passes beneath carved pillars shaped like the face of Hathor coward, smiling gently, crowned with the solar disk. The fading light gives them a soft glow, as if they are breathing. A young priestess greets her with a slight bow but does not speak. They know Neferet here. She has been making offerings since she was a girl. She walks through the cool stone halls into the inner sanctum, where a statue of the goddess rests, cloaked in gold and dark kohl, eyes painted with care, lips touched with red ochre. Around her are flowers, lyle, lotus, desert rosy sand, small trays of offerings, wine, bread, figs, and perfume. Neferet kneels. She unwraps the lotus bundle and places it in a shallow bowl beside the statue. Then she opens her jar. The scent is soft, a new spikenard, jasmine, blue lotus, and cassia. She dips her fingers lightly into the mixture and anoints the base of the statue, tracing the carved toes with care. The oil catches the last of the candlelight. She whispers a prayer under her breath, not a request, but a thanks, a quiet honoring of beauty, of memory, of the unseen hands that guide her craft. Around her, the temple is still. Candles flicker, incense curls toward the ceiling. Somewhere deeper in the complex, a harp plays a slow, repeating pattern for notes, then a pause, for notes, then silence. It is a song she has heard before, perhaps meant for ritual, perhaps simply practice, but in this hour, it feels sacred. She remains kneeling for some time, breathing in the amber and beeswax, old stone and fresh flowers. There is peace here, a peace she does not find in the market or in the chatter of noblewomen. This is a place where scent and silence are equal, where time thickens and the world holds its breath. When she finally rises, she feels lighter, as though the evening has taken some unseen burden from her shoulders. She walks slowly back through the halls, bowing slightly to each priestess she passes. At the gate, she pauses, looking once more at the face of Hathor carved above her. The stars are beginning to appear now, scattered across the darkening sky like grains of silver and black coal. The moon, pale and high, rises over the Nile. Neferet walks home beneath its gaze, her pace on her. She takes a narrow path, past gardens and quiet courtyards, where oil lamps glow behind linen-draped windows. Somewhere nearby, someone is singing softly, a lullaby, perhaps a hymn. She follows the sound for a few steps, not to reach its source, but to walk within its echo. This, too, is a kind of offering, a fragrance not of flowers, but of voice and dusk and memory. By the time she reaches her courtyard, the sky is deep, violet. The coals in the workshop brazier have cooled, and the last of the day's jars sit undisturbed on the shelf. Seishat, the cat, has disappeared into the shadows, hunting or dreaming or both. Neferet lights a small lamp and sets it near the door. She drinks a final cup of water, washes her hands slowly with a cloth dipped in rose-scented basin water, and places her shawl carefully on the peg by the wall. She does not work again tonight. The day's perfumes are finished, the jars are sealed, the scrolls are rolled. All that remains is rest. She lies on her sleeping mat and pulls a thin linen sheet over her. From a small jar beside her bed, she dabs oil on her wrists, blue lotus and sweet almond, soft and gentle, a scent that leads her into dreams. The air is still warm, the night is quiet. Outside, the Nile flows in silence, and as sleep pulls her into its arms, the scent of the goddess remains on her skin, carrying her gently through the night. That night, in the deep silence of Thebes, with the scent of blue lotus still clinging softly to her skin, Neferet drifts into sleep. It is not a restless sleep, nor one filled with vivid visions. Rather, it is slow, gentle, like floating down the Nile under moonlight. The dreams come quietly, without edges. At first, it is just sound water lapping, the faint rhythm of an oar, wind through reeds. Then color, pale blues and creams, gold dust in the sky. Finally, a feeling, familiar, a sense of being small again, unburdened, the sensation of linen too big for her shoulders and the presence of her mother's hand resting warm against her back. She is a child in the dream, perhaps 8 or 9, walking beside her mother through a field outside the southern edge of Thebes. The sun is low, the air is golden, the papyrus stalks sway in the soft wind, and the water channels between them sparkle. They are carrying woven baskets, each filled with freshly gathered herbs, mint, marjoram, wild thyme, and desert lavender. The sky stretches overhead like painted silk, clear and endless. Her mother's voice is calm and low, pointing out plants and calling them by their names, not the names others use, but the ones passed down through generations of women's secret names, sacred ones. This, her mother says, holding up a sprig of flowering sage, is called the breath of Mat. It calms the blood and clears the mind. We do not use too much, only a touch, and only when balance must be restored. Neferet nods, holding her basket with both hands, eyes wide with the solemnity of the moment. She does not speak, even in dreams. She knows the weight of learning. They walk farther, past small mud brick houses and quiet goat pens, until they reach the base of a low hill. The sun is nearly down now. The shadows are long and purple across the earth. At the top of the hill is a old sycamore fig, thick-trunked and wise. Her mother stops and kneels. She places the basket on the ground and begins to lay out the herbs in a careful circle. Neferet mirrors her, placing each plant beside the next, leaves touching, forming a ring of green and silver and violet. Then her mother takes a small jar from her satchel. It is carved from black stone and sealed with bees. She opens it with care, and instantly the air fills with scent, amber, cinnamon, and something bright like crushed petals. Her mother dabs a bit on her fingers, then presses them gently to Neferet's temples, whispering a word Neferet cannot recall but somehow understands. It is a word of blessing, of protection, the kind of word spoken between stars and dreams. Her mother then closes the jar and places it at the center of the herb circle. Neferet looks at her mother's face. The expression is not sad, nor joyful. It is something older, something like reverence. Her mother leans forward and whispers, "Everything remembers, Neferet, the plants, the stones, even the air." The scent carries memory farther than any chisel, farther than ink on papyrus. When you create perfume, you are not making something new. You are speaking in a language older than speech. The dream shifts. The sun has set completely now. The field is bathed in blue twilight. The trees are shadows. The air hums with silence. Neferet, still a child, lies on her side near the circle of herbs, head resting against her mother's lap. She watches the stars appear one by one. There is no fear, only stillness. She feels the warmth of the earth beneath her, the rhythm of her mother's breath above her, and the scent of perfume lingering on the wind. She closes her eyes, and then, gently, she wakes. It is still dark. The house is silent. The coals in the brazier have long since faded. Outside, the Nile flows slow and black. Neferet lies still for a long moment, eyes adjusting to the dimness. The scent of blue lotus remains on her wrists, soft and comforting. But beneath it now is a faint memory, cinnamon and amber and crushed petals. She smiles faintly, not fully certain whether it was only a dream or something else. But it does not matter. The message has reached her. She rises from her mat and pours herself a small cup of water. She does not light a lamp. She walks through the darkness by memory. At the shelf by the workshop door, she selects a small black stone jar, the one that once belonged to her mother. She opens it carefully. The scent is faint now, aged and soft by time, but it is still there. Cinnamon, amber, crushed petals. She inhales deeply, eyes closed, and for a moment she is a child again. Beneath the sycamore fig, surrounded by wild thyme and the warmth of a hand on her shoulder, she reseals the jar and sets it on the table. Then, quietly, she returns to her bed and falls back into sleep, dreamless this time, and complete. The morning in Thebes arrives slowly, with pale light spilling over the eastern hills and soft birdsong rising in the fig trees. The air is cool, touched with dew. Neferet stirs gently from sleep, blinking at the quiet glow of dawn through her linen-draped window. The scent of blue lotus still lingers faintly in the room, mingled now with the crisp freshness of early air and the earthy warmth of clay walls that have cooled through the night. She rises without hurry, washes her face and hands with rose water from a wide bowl, and smooths her linen dress. Its folds neatly pressed from the evening before. Today feels different, quiet still, but full of something unspoken. She steps into the courtyard, where the sun has only just begun to touch the ground. Sechet, the cat, is already awake, sitting near the herb pots, blinking slowly at the sky. Neferet feeds her a scrap of bread soaked in goat's milk, then checks the small garden by the back wall. The lavender is in bloom. The mint is spreading faster than expected. She smiles faintly, plucking a few sprigs and tucking them into a pouch to dry later. Her hands are steady. Her breath is even, but there's a faint tension in the stillness, like the city is waiting. And then it comes. A knock at the wooden gate, not loud, not impatient, but firm, measured. She wipes her hands and walks through the shaded corridor to the front entrance. When she opens the gate, a young man stands before her, dressed in the finely woven white of a royal courier. His skin is dark and smooth, his posture upright, his sandals polished. He carries a lacquered scroll case-marked with the seal of the palace. His eyes are kind, though his face is carefully neutral, as trained messengers are. "Neferet, daughter of Perfumer," he says. She nods. "I bring word from the House of the Horizon. The great wife of the pharaoh requests your skill." For a moment, Neferet only blinks. The House of the Horizon, Akitnasius, the palace district, far above the city near the royal tombs. Few were summoned there without purpose, fewer still without cause. She bows her head slightly in acceptance. "Am I to prepare something for the queen?" The messenger shakes his head once. "No." She asks, "That you come in person today, before the sun reaches its peak." He hands her the scroll, though it is more formality than necessity. The seal is real. The script is real. Her name is written in flowing ink beneath the cartouche of the queen, great wife to Pharaoh, keeper of the two crowns, she who sees the sun. "I will come," Neferet says simply. The courier bows and turns, without further word, vanishing into the winding street beyond. Neferet stands quietly at the gate for a long moment. Thebes begins to stir in the distance, the low hum of merchants unpacking goods, the cry of a boy chasing chickens down an alley, the bark of a dog on a rooftop. But here, in her small courtyard, the world feels paused. She closes the gate and turns back inside. She packs without haste, but with care. She selects a narrow box of rare oil-smir galbanum, blue lotus, and 2 small vials of spikenard. She adds a scroll of blank papyrus, a fresh reed pen, and a strip of clean linen to tie her hair. From a hidden shelf she retrieves a smooth black jarwan she almost never uses. It contains an aged blend of cedar, incense, resin, and something no longer available from the living oil pressed from an imported root that grew only in distant Kush. It is not for markets, not even for temples. It is for the Dodor, the divine. By the time she finishes preparing, the sun has risen above the eastern ridge, warming the bricks in the air. She locks the workshop behind her and steps into the street. A chariot waits near the square, not garish, but finely made, its canopy draped in linen against the sun. The same messenger holds the reins. He nods silently as she approaches. She climbs in beside him, steady and composed, though her thoughts move like the river in flood. Why would the queen herself summon a what could not be handled through servants, through intermediaries, through layers of scribes and court? The ride takes them up, away from the crowded lanes of the city, past tall palms and quiet homes, past gardens with high walls and pools lined with lotus. As they climb toward the plateau where the palace district rests, the breeze shifts. The air smells less of kitchens and markets, and more of open sky and distance. Thebes recedes behind them, soft and sunlit. Before them rises the outer wall of the House of the Horizon, pale stone, clean lines, guarded by silent men in linen kilts and gold collars. They pass through without delay. Inside, the palace is a world apart. It is quiet not from emptiness, but from refinement. Water flows through carved channels. Birds flit between papyrus fronds in sheltered gardens. Servants move like shadows, eyes down, hands swift. The messenger leads her through arched corridors cooled with shade, past murals of the gods and ceilings painted deep blue with stars. Finally, they stop before a wide doorway framed in golden lapis. A voice calls from within, "Send her in." The courier steps aside. Neferet, enter. The room is not large, not grand. It is private, cool and dim, with sheer curtains stirring in the breeze. And there, seated upon a low couch of carved ebony, is the great wife of the pharaoh. Her skin is the color of polished bronze, her hair wrapped in fine linen, her hands adorned with rings shaped like lotus and falcon wings. She is beautiful, but more than that still. Her gaze is quiet and deep, like someone who listens even when no one speaks. "Neferet kneels, rise," says the queen, voice soft. "I did not summon you as a servant." Neferet stands slowly, her basket still held in both hands. The queen gestures to the seat beside her. "There is a matter," she says, "of great delicacy. I need a perfume that no one has ever worn, a scent that belongs not to this life but to memory, to mourning, to something we dare not name." She turns her gaze toward the open window. "Will you help me remember someone who must never be spoken of?" The room remains still after the queen's words, as though the air itself is holding its breath. Neferet does not speak. She waits, sensing the weight in the queen's voice. This is not simply a commission. It is something older, deeper, a scent not to please, but to preserve, not to wear, but to remember. The queen lifts her hand, slender fingers tracing the rim of a small alabaster vessel resting on a low table beside her. Her gaze remains distant, her expression unreadable. "He is gone," she says finally, "and we are not to speak his name. But I remember him in the hours before dawn, when the palace is quiet and the courtyards are still. I remember his voice, not in words, but in silence. I want a scent to carry that silence." Her fingers pause on the vessel, something that won't fade. Neferet bows her head slightly. I understand she's not sure she does. Not fully, but she knows grief when it has no shape. She knows the language of perfume, the way it speaks without voice, the way it lingers where memory falters. The queen nods once and gestures toward a low stone shelf lined with sealed jars. "These were his," she says. "He had them brought from temples, from gardens, from foreign lands. Some still hold their fragrance. Others are only dust now. Begin there. See what remains?" Neferet steps forward slowly, setting her own box of materials aside. She kneels before the shelf, her fingers light on the lids of the vessels. The first she opens is dry crumbled sandalwood, long since faded. The next yields a faint trace of frankincense, sweet and brittle. Another holds dried rose petals, dark with age, still holding a whisper of their scent. One jar surprises her. It is filled with a dark green paste-preserved myrrh and sharp, earthy, resinous. She inhales deeply, eyes closing. For the next hour, she moves quietly, examining, weighing, testing. Instead, she listens to the scents, to the stillness, to the memory pressed into these jars. Each fragrance tells her a fragment: the bitter sharpness of juniper berries, the sweet rot of dried figs, the clean clarity of crushed mint. She touches none of it with oil yet. She lets it speak. The queen watches in silence, occasionally turning her gaze to the window where doves gather in the shade. Once she speaks, "He liked the desert after rain. That smell, do you know it?" Neferet nods. The ground releases it, wet stone and dry roots waking. The queen smiles faintly. "Yes, that." By midday, Neferet has selected 3 materials from the queen's collection: the green galbanum paste, a pouch of dried wild thyme, and a sealed vessel of resin marked with the Nubian sigil. She adds 2 of her own blue lotus, not for sweetness, but for stillness, and labdanum from her private store, thick and dark and rich with shadow. With permission, she moves to a preparation table near the window. Sunlight falls across it in bands. The air is warm, but quiet. She grinds the dried herbs slowly, using a bronze mortar, older than the palace itself. She warms the resins over a clay brazier, coaxing the scent from their depths without burning. She stirs them into oil drop by drop, testing the proportions, not by formula, but by breath. Each time she adjusts the blend, she closes her eyes and inhales, asking a silent question. Does this remember? Not please, not impress, but recall. Pull from silence, from shadow, from absence. By the time she finishes, the sun has begun to lower again, its light turning the room golden. The perfume rests in a small alabaster jar, sealed with beeswax and bound in linen. She offers it to the queen without ceremony, holding it in both hands. The queen does not open it. She takes it as if it is something too fragile to disturb. She sets it beside her and lets her fingers rest lightly against the cool stone. "Thank you," she says. But the words are not simply gratitude, they are something heavier, as if what she holds is not perfume, but memory made tangible, a presence in a vessel, a silence given form. Neferet bows, her head low, not as a servant, but as one who has been entrusted with something sacred. The queen gestures toward the door. You may go when ready. A chariot will return you. Neferet gathers her things quietly. Before she leaves, she glances back. The queen has not moved. Her eyes are closed. Her hand remains resting on the jar. As Neferet is led back through the palace, past the gardens and courtyards and pools, she feels changed. Not in a way she can name, but something within her has shifted. She has created sense for brides, for nobles, for priests, and dancers and merchants. But this is the first time she has been asked to create something for the unspoken, for someone who is gone, for memory itself. The chariot carries her slowly down the slope toward the city. Thebes spreads before her like a living tapestry. The Nile gleams in the sun. Boats drift lazily in the shallows. Smoke rises from cook fires. Children run along rooftops. But all of it seems quieter now, as if the whole city is wrapped in the same stillness that settled in the Queen's chamber. By the time Neferet returns to her courtyard, the shadows are long. The scent of the sacred blend still lingers on her fingertips. She does not wash it off. Not yet. The courtyard is bathed in the amber glow of late afternoon when Neferet closes the wooden gate behind her. The familiar sense of home rise to greet her dried lavender hanging from the eaves. Warm clay, distant incense from a neighbor's evening ritual. Seshat the cat waits in her usual spot on the garden wall, tail curled neatly around her paws, eyes half-lidded with the fading heat. Neferet greets her with a soft hum and pours a little water into a shallow bowl, watching as Seshat drinks with practiced calm. Inside, the house is cool. She places her case on the work table, but she does not open it. Not yet. The weight of the Queen's commission still lingers in her chest, not heavy, not painful, but present, like the scent of myrrh clinging long after the brazier goes out. It was not simply a task. It was something more sacred than her work had ever been allowed to be. She sits for a long time, not to rest, but to reflect. Her fingers trace the wood grain of the table. The light from the high window shifts slowly. Around her, the world continues in quiet rhythms. The clink of a pot from the neighbor's kitchen, the distant laughter of children, the soft creak of the papyrus curtain as a breeze moves through. Everything feels a little changed, as though something invisible has passed through and left the air altered. She thinks back to her earliest days learning the craft, watching her father mix resins by lamplight, his hands steady even as age made his voice tremble. He would speak often of balance not just in scent, but in spirit. A perfume must carry more than a smell, he once told her. It must carry meaning, else it is just smoke in the wind. She did not fully understand then. But today, in the Queen's chamber, she had felt it. The weight of remembrance, the precision of mourning. She rises slowly and lights the small oil lamp near the corner of the workshop. Shadows flickered gently across the stone walls. She draws out a fresh strip of linen and places it on the table, then retrieves her personal journal, its pages soft with use, the edges curled from years of mixing, measuring, thinking. With careful strokes, she writes, a blend for silence, for absence, not to soothe, but to remember. Galbanum, dark and green. Labdanum for shadow. Blue lotus too, still the breath. A thread of wild thyme, dry as wind on stone. And resin from Nubia sharp, bitter, ancient. This is not a perfume for the living. She lets the ink dry before closing the scroll. Then she sets it aside. Only then does she begin preparing for the evening. Not because she must, but because the rhythm of the day continues, even after profound moments. The oils must be checked. The petals for tomorrow must be sorted. She unwraps a new delivery from a supplier near the Karnak Gardens, fresh jasmine, soft and pale, their scent already seeping into the cloth. She smiles faintly and begins the careful work of separating the best blooms from the ones too bruised by travel. Each one examined, each placed with care into the drying tray lined with woven reed. It is simple work, quiet work, but meaningful in its own way. Later, as dusk deepens and lamps flicker on across Thebes, Neferet climbs to the flat roof of her house. The sky is a deepening indigo, scattered with the first faint stars. In the distance, the temples stand silhouetted against the horizon, their columns like the trunks of petrified trees. Smoke curls from altars, The sounds of the day grow softer, more distant, more dreamlike. She carries with her a tiny vial of the Queen's blend, sealed and untouched. She opens it slowly and lets a single drop fall onto a clay dish at her side. The scent rises in the warm night air, faint and complex. It does not fill the space like other perfumes. It lingers near her skin, as if reluctant to travel. A scent that listens, not speaks, that waits rather than calls. She closes her eyes and sits with it. In that moment, time feels less like a line and more like a circle. She thinks of the people who once walked these streets, who loved and lost, who carried grief quietly behind their eyes. The scent in the air is not just for the Queen, it is for them, for all who carry names they cannot say, for all who remember what cannot be held. She breathes in and breathes out. Seshat joins her on the roof, curling beside her on the warm stone, purring faintly. Night thickens around them. Thebes sleeps, and Neferet, keeper of forgotten fragrances, lets herself drift into that same silence, held not by dreams, but by memory. Morning comes gently, slipping across the floor of Neferet's home in soft lines of gold and pale shadow. She moves slowly today, not from fatigue, but from focus. Her workshop carries the scent of cardamom and laurel fint, steady and warm. The jars are arranged in a new pattern, according to her own rhythms rather than the temple's request. For once, there is no order due, no royal summons, no visiting priest to impress, only her and the oils and the quiet. A knock comes, not from the gate, but from the side passage. Unusual, most visitors come from the front. When she opens the door, a tall man stands before her, his linen robes creased from travel, dust clinging to his sandals. His skin is darker than most in Thebes, and his accent, when he speaks, carries the lilt of the far south beyond Nubia. He introduces himself as Menahem and holds out a sealed letter. The seal is plain, pressed with the mark of a trade guild. Neferet faintly recognizes a symbol used by merchants who traveled the length of the Nile, bartering not just goods, but knowledge. She breaks the seal and reads the short message within. It's from a perfumer in Elephantine, one she met years ago during a brief visit to the southern quarries. The note says simply, "Trust him. He carries stories worth your time." Neferet invites him in. Menahem doesn't speak at first. He only walks slowly around the workshop, eyes moving over the shelves, the amphorae, the hanging garlands of dried herbs. He stops before a jar of labdanum resin and inhales deeply, as if trying to catch a memory. Then he turns to her and says, "Your craft speaks louder than your walls." She nods once. "And what does it say?" "That you listen before you create." They speak for a while slowly, like two rivers meeting. Menahem has brought with him a set of small pouches wrapped in goat leather. Inside each are rare ingredients she has never handled before. Crushed petals of a southern blom that only opens at night, resin from trees that bleed red when cut, and a kind of dried fruit that smells like smoke and salt. He places them gently on her work table. "These are not for sale. I was told you would know what to do with them." Neferet lights a charcoal disc and sets a pinch of the resin onto it. The scent that rises is unlike anything in her workshop, dark, almost bitter, but strangely calming. It reminds her of evenings after rain, of silence before a storm. Menahem watches her closely. "This resin," he says, "was once burned before the burial of a southern prince. They believed it kept the soul from forgetting its path." Neferet nods. "You believe in scent as memory, too." "Not just memory," he replies, "direction." They begin to work together, quietly, respectfully. She hands him a pestle and he grinds the dried fruit into powder. She stirs the melted resins. They move without much talk, only glances and brief nods. The blend they create is thick and slow, absorbing the heat like honey left in the sun. She adds a thread of her own blue lotus oil, and he sprinkles crushed bark from a tree he calls the Whispering One. When it's done, they both stand over the bowl. Neferet dips a finger and touches it to the back of her hand. The scent is layer-sharp at first, then smoky, then almost sweet. Menahem breathes it in and closes his eyes. "That is the scent of passage," he says, "of crossing from one place into another." Neferet writes a single line in her journal. "Today, a stranger showed me a scent that opens doors." As the afternoon deepens, Menahem shares stories of his travels. of marketplaces that vanish after sunset, of river towns where the wind smells of metal and moss, of a woman who could identify a thief by the oily war. He speaks slowly, with care, as if the words are sacred. Neferet listens, storing each one like a vial on a shelf. When the sun begins to lower, she offers him a place to sleep in the guest alcove. He declines with a "But I must return to the river. There's a boat waiting, but I'll leave you this." He hands her one final pouch seal with a loop of red thread. "Don't open it until the next full moon," he says. "It's meant for a time of reflection." She walks him to the gate. As he steps into the fading light, she calls after him, "What should I call this blend we made?" He doesn't turn, but raises a hand. "Call it threshold. That's what it is." Then he is gone, his figure swallowed by the narrow alleys and the scent of coming dusk. Inside, Neferet places the sealed pouch on a high shelf. She labels the new blend carefully and pours it into a small glass vial. It is unlike anything else in her collection, not meant to comfort nor to delight. It is meant to guide. She sits for a while in the quiet of her workroom. Sometimes the most valuable ingredients are not oils or herbs. Sometimes they are the people who carry them, the stories that ride on scent, and the spaces between two breaths when something ancient arrives and leaves only perfume behind. The days move gently through Thebes, each one a soft ripple in the wide river of time. Neferet's life returns to its familiar rhythm, but beneath the surface, she carries a quiet transformation. Something has shifted since the Queen's commission, since Imeni's visit. The fragrances she once created as routine now feel like sacred offerings. Even the simplest blend of oil and flower is touched by deeper thought, greater care. It is near midday when the summons comes. A priest from the temple of Khonsu arrives at her door, robed in clean white linen, his head shaved, his posture calm and reverent. He carries no scroll, only a small clay tablet marked with sacred symbols and her name pressed in ink. He bows slightly. "You were requested by the high priest of Khonsu. Your presence is needed for a ritual of scent." Neferet accepts the tablet without hesitation. She knows the temple well, its pillars, its shadows, the deep silence inside its walls. But she has never been called to participate in ritual. Her perfumes have been delivered, blessed, used, but never has she been asked to bring them in person. She gathers her oils carefully. Not all, only the ones that feel right for such a space. Myrrh, aged in moonlight. Cypress resin wrapped in gold cloth. The smoke essence of cedarwood, captured during a winter festival years ago. She wraps each in linen, places them in a reed box, and follows the priest through the winding streets. The temple stands tall and still, its stone face worn smooth by centuries of wind and heat. As they pass under the massive gate, Neferet feels the temperature drop slightly, the coolness of sacred air, the hush of old prayers still echoing in the stones. Inside, the halls are dim, lit only by slits of sunlight and oil lamps set high on the walls. The scent of incense lingers, not heavy, but ancient. She follows the priest through a long corridor until they reach a chamber lined with carved columns, each etched with images of the moon god Khonsu with his sidelock and moon disk, holding the scepter of life. The high priest waits in the center of the chamber, robed in fine linen, his face calm and unreadable. Beside him, a small altar rests, flanked by bronze burners and sealed jars. He speaks softly. "Tonight, the moon is full. We honor Khonsu, guardian of time and healer of sleep. We will bathe his image in scent, not just smoke, but memory, dream, breath. The gods accept only what is made with truth. This is why you are summoned." Neferet bows. She opens her reed box slowly, setting out each jar with care. The high priest watches, saying nothing. Only when the last jar is placed does he speak again. "You may begin." The ritual is simple in form, but heavy in spirit. She starts by warming the base oil zolif pressed under the last new moon, blended with myrrh and crushed violet root. The air thickens slightly as the scent rises, curling around the statues and pillars. Then she adds cedar smoke, dropping chips into the bronze brazier, watching them catch and The high priest chants softly in the background, words ancient and smooth, repeating like water on stone. Neferet moves in silence, adding layers of scent, one for the waking world, one for the realm of dreams, one for what lies in between. She closes her eyes as she works, letting the scent guide her hands, letting memory and instinct take hold. She adds lotus lass, not blue, but white, rare, subtle, a scent not of sweetness, but stillness. The chamber is quiet, save for the crackle of fire and the soft rhythm of prayer. When the final drop is added, the high priest raises his arms. A soft bell rings from a corridor beyond. The ritual is done. The statue of Khonsu is wrapped in linen, now infused with the layers Neferet crafted. He will wear them through the night. Standing watch over dreams, the high priest turns to her. You understand the silence between scents. This is rare. The gods notice such things. She bows, but says nothing. Words would break the moment. She is given a place in the outer court to rest, where a servant offers water steeped in hibiscus and a simple tray of dates and bread. Neferet eats slowly, not out of hunger, but presence. She feels calm, not because the work is done, but because it was understood. As the moon begins to rise outside the temple walls, she steps into the garden court. The stones are cool beneath her feet. Palm trees cast long shadows. Somewhere nearby, a nightbird calls out softly. She lifts her head and breathes in. The scent still lingers. Not just the perfume she created, but the essence of the space-old stone. Sacred oils, breath held in stillness. She realizes, standing in that garden, that perfume for the gods is not about ingredients or skill. It is about listening to the quiet, to memory, to the breath between moments. And so she listens. Morning light returns to Thebes like a soft exhale. The shadows stretch long across the alleys, and the sound of early market carts rattling along stone paths echoes gently. Neferet steps into her courtyard, refreshed but quiet, still carrying the echo of the temple ritual in her thoughts. Some fragrances cling not to the skin, but to the soul, and the perfume she crafted for Khonsu was one such scent. Today, her tasks are simpler. A delivery of new resins from the Eastern merchants, a set of jars needing to be cleaned and relabeled, the usual notes to record in her scent journal. She ties back her hair with a linen band and begins grinding dried herbs, marjoram and mint, preparing them for later infusion. It is just past mid-morning when the knock comes again, firm but uneven, as if made by someone unfamiliar with the gate. She opens it to find a boy standing there, perhaps no more than 12, clutching a cloth bundle to his chest. His sandals are dusty, and a fresh bruise blooms just below his knee, but his eyes are wide and alert. "Are you Neferet, the perfumer?" he asks, breathless. She nods, studying him. "My aunt sent me," he says quickly. "She sells lemons by the river. She said you're kind to those who try." There is a flicker of amusement in Neferet's expression. "Did she also say, 'I take in stray cats and wandering children'?" She said, "You might need help." Neferet folds her arms. "And what can you do?" "I can smell things," he blurts, too quickly. I can tell when bread will burn before it does. I knew when the neighbor's goat was sick, even before it made noise. I know when the rain will come, because the air changes. It's not just smell, it's something." Neferet considers this. The boy is not lying. His tone is too earnest. She gestures toward the workshop. "Come in, we'll see." She leads him to the mixing table and opens a box of linen strips, each soaked in a different oil. Without telling him what they are, she holds them out one by one. He inhales each carefully, eyes closed, face tilted slightly. "This one is warm," he says, "like sunlight on stone, but also a little sharp, like when someone crushes green leaves underfoot." Neferet nods. "Galbanum and sun-dried cypress." The next one, he hesitates. "It smelt ... blue," he says slowly. "If blue could be a smell, lotus," Neferet replies, smiling faintly. "Blue lotus. Very few ever describe it that way." One by one, he names them not by word, but by feeling. He cannot always say the ingredient, but he captures the soul of the scent. Neferet listens more than she speaks. The boy reminds her of herself, years ago, when she first realized scent was not just aroma, but emotion. "What is your name?" she asks. "Kapu," he says. "It means shelter." "Or, so my mother said." "Fitting," she murmurs. She gives him a pestle and a small bowl of dried rose petals. "Show me how you grind." He works carefully, not fast, not careless. The rhythm is there, though the pressure needs refining. She watches, offering no correction, only observation. He finishes and looks up, unsure. Neferet nods. There's potential. For the next few hours, Kapu remains in the workshop. He does not chatter, but he watches everything. How she pours the oils, how she tests blends by warmth, by weight, At one point, she catches him smelling the wooden table itself, eyes half closed. "It holds the scents of every oil I've ever spilled," she says. "The wood remembers." Kapoor grins. By midday, she gives him a task. "Sort these petals," she says, placing 3 bowls in front of him: jasmine, hibiscus, and poppy. "Some are bruised, some are too dry. Keep only those worth keeping." He works with quiet focus, selecting one by one, setting aside the damaged ones without question. When he finishes, she inspects his work. "It is near perfect." "You're not trained," she says, "but you're aware. You listen with more than your ears." He shrugs. "I just want to know why things smell the way they do." Neferet offers him a cup of water and a piece of sweetened fig. "You can come back tomorrow." "Not every day, but when I have time to teach." His eyes brighten, but he nods solemnly, as if accepting a sacred duty. Before he leaves, he hesitates at the door. "What does your name mean?" he asks. "Neferet. It means beautiful." Kapoor tilts his head. "It suits you." And with that, he vanishes down the street, the dust rising behind his feet. Neferet watches the gate long after he's gone. The scent of rose still lingers in the room, but beneath it is something new. A sense of continuity, a thread passing from one hand to another. She returns to her bench and writes in her journal. The boy smells like questions, like beginnings, like the space just before a scent takes form. She sets down her pen and lets the day breathe. Late summer settles over Thebes like warm linen. The air is thick with the scent of ripe dates and drying straw. The river moves slowly, sluggish beneath the heat, and even the birds quiet their songs. Neferet works in the stillness, her jars arranged neatly, her tools laid out in precise rows. Kapoor has not come. Today's aunt needed help at the lemon storeland. The silence feels spacious rather than empty. She is straining oil from a batch of aged frankincense when the message arrives, not by scroll or servant, but by the soft tap of a stone against her courtyard gate. She opens it to find no one, only a small object placed carefully on the step. It is a folded cloth bundle tied with twine, resting atop a polished black pebble, the kind found only near the cliffs west of the river. A symbol, subtle and unmistakable. The necropolis. Neferet unties the bundle slowly. Inside is a small scrap of papyrus, folded many times and sealed with wax. The mark pressed into it is old but clean, the sign of the overseer of burial perfumes. A roll held only by those charged with preparing the scents of the deed. Ritual blends for embalming, for farewell rites, for eternal rest. She reads the message once. Then again, it is a request, not a demand. But beneath the polite phrasing is weight. A body has arrived at the House of Eternity, a high official from the court, unnamed. The ritual is scheduled for the 3rd night from now, and they ask for Neferet, not just her perfumes, but her presence. She gathers her things without haste. Some blends she knows will be needed: pine resins soaked in red wine, crushed juniper berries, oil of myrrh dark as ink. Others she will create once she sees the face of the departed. Every embalming blend is different. The scent must guide the spirit not just out of the body, but into the memory of those left behind. The sun begins to lower as she crosses the river. The boatman rows in silence, his face lined with age, his breath slow and even. On the western shore, the cliffs rise, like ancient backs bent in mourning. The necropolis lies nestled at their feet: temples, tombs, chambers carved into rock. It is a place of endings, and yet it breathes. At the House of Eternity, she is greeted by a man in linen robes, his face veiled. He bows but says little. In such places, words are precious. He leads her into a cool chamber lit only by flickering oil lamps. The scent of natron and linen fills the air, dry, clean, expectant. The body lies on a stone table, already wrapped in the first layers of cloth. Only the face is exposed. A man, middle-aged, his features calm, his lips faintly curved. There is no visible pain in his expression. He looks as though he has merely closed his eyes to listen. The embalmer gestures for her to begin. Neferet opens her reed case. She selects her tools carefully: wooden spatulas, small copper bowls, a curved spoon carved from ivory. She warms the base oil gently over a low flame, then adds powdered cinnamon bark and resinous. The scent is sweet, woody, sharp at the edges, a scent of memory, of clarity. She moves with care, anointing the linen around the body's chest, then his temples, then the soles of his feet. Each movement is deliberate, each drop placed like a final word. Then she blends a second oil heavier with layers of pine pitch and crushed bark, touched with honeyed myrrh. This one she applies to the cloth wrapping his hands. Hands that once signed royal decrees, now folded in eternal stillness. Her final blend is the rarest, a fragrance meant not for the body, but the space around it. A perfume of farewell. She stirs together the dried petals of desert saffron, oil of cypress, and a single thread of blue lotus. The scent is subtle, like breath before speech. She lights a small flame and lets the perfume rise into the chamber. The others stand still, eyes closed. When it is done, the embalmer speaks one phrase in a low voice. He will walk gently into the field of reeds. Neferet bows her head. She is given no coin, no offering, only silence. And yet it feels full, sacred. She leaves the necropolis as night begins to fall. The stars appear slowly above the cliffs, and the wind carries a faint trace of the perfume she left behind. She crosses the river once more, alone in the boat, listening to the creak of wood in the hush of water. Back in her workshop, she lights a single lamp and writes in her journal. There is a perfume for the living, and a perfume for those who have passed. But the rarest scent is the one that remains after both have gone. It clings to stone, to memory, to breath held between worlds. She places the journal aside and lets the lamp burn low. Outside, the wind shifts. Somewhere in the city, a child dreams, and the scent of farewell lingers in the air. Thebes rises into morning under a veil of gold. The city exhales with the sun, waking slowly, stretching beneath its sandstone rooftops. From her courtyard, Neferet listens to the distant stirrings of vendors, the faint clatter of amphorae being rolled from cool storage. A breeze moves through the lemon tree, scattering a few blossoms onto the stones at her feet. The air carries the soft trace of yesterday's oil, cypress and cardamom, old yet alive. She pours a measure of rose water into a clay cup and sips slowly, her mind quiet, her body still recovering from the journey to the necropolis. But her rest is brief. The knock comes not from the gate this time, but from the front of her home. A sharp, confident, rap-measured, official. She opens the door and finds a man in a deep blue sash, bearing the emblem of the royal court. His scroll case is sealed with gold wax, the mark of the queen's house impressed upon it. He bows a message from the palace of Mirietaman. Neferet breaks the seal with care. The scroll is short. To Neferet, keeper of scent. Your presence is requested at the house of the Lotus Pavilion 2 days hence. The queen wishes to discuss a matter of fragrance and memory. Come prepared, but unburdened. By her hand, scribe of the chamber. Neferet stares at the words, letting their meaning settle into the folds of her day. The queen remembers. 2 days later, she walks the winding road to the royal quarter. She wears a simple linen dress, clean and unadorned, her hair wrapped in a soft white cloth. She brings no apprentice, no assistant, only a small basket of jars, some filled, some empty, and one sealed with a wax stamp shaped like a crescent moon. The Lotus Pavilion rests near the edge of the royal gardens. It is not grand like the throne halls or audience courts, but serene, its walls painted with reeds and birds, its pools still and clear. A courtier leads her through a shaded path, lined with flowering papyrus. The scent here is soft, not perfumed, but natural, the smell of blooming water plants, warm stone, and damp earth. The queen waits beneath a wide canopy of linen. She is seated on a low couch, draped in pale blue, her head resting lightly against her hand. There is no crown, no gold, only presence. When she sees Neferet, she smiles, not the distant smile of royalty, but something softer. You came, she says. Neferet bows. Always, my queen. Mirietaman gestures to a stool beside her. Sit, the breeze is kind today. They sit in quiet for a moment, watching dragonflies flicker across the pond. Then the queen speaks. I've been thinking about my mother. Neferet says nothing. She wore a scent faint, never overwhelming. I remember it best when she left a room, as though she took the warmth with her, but left the memory behind. Neferet nods slowly. Scents often remain where people no longer do. The queen glances toward a low table, where several clay bottles sit on. I've asked many perfumers to recreate it. They try, but none succeed. They bring oil sweet, heavy, proud, but what I remember was quieter. Neferet studies her face. What did it feel like? Not what did it smell like? The queen closes her eyes. It felt like late summer, like the hush of servants when she entered, like the way my sheets smelled after she tucked me in. Safe, but not fragile. Warm, but not floral. Neferet listens, carefully. She opens her basket and removes 3 jars. One is filled with aged henna oil, another with dried sage wrapped in linen, and the last a small jar containing ground ambrette seed, soft as silk, with a scent that hovers between skin and shadow. She blends slowly, adding a drop of sandalwood, a breath of rose petal crushed between fingers, and finally a hint of the moon oil she reserved from Khonsu's ritual. Not much, only a whisper, enough to be felt, not known. The queen leans forward as Neferet warms the blend in her hands. Then, gently, Neferet offers her wrist. The queen breathes in and stills. She closes her eyes. When she opens them, they are wet with memory. "That's it," she whispers. "That's her." Neferet bows her head. "I don't know how you knew," the queen murmurs. "I didn't," Neferet replies, "but I listened." They sit together. As the wind moves the lilies, the queen says nothing more for a long while, and Neferet does not speak. Not all silence is empty. Some of it is filled with breath and the echoes of rooms long since walked. As the sun lowers, a servant arrives with a box made of carved ebony. It is small, light, sealed with a clasp of lapis. The queen offers it without ceremony. "A gift," she says, "for your craft." And because I remembered, Neferet accepts it with a bow. Before she leaves, the queen says one final thing. "When I die someday, far from now, I want this scent to carry me into the beyond. No heavy oils, no thick smoke, just this, a memory wrapped in linen." Neferet bows more deeply than before. It will be done. Evening in Thebes arrives, like an old song. The sky darkens not in haste, but with grace, its gold slipping gently into indigo. The Nile reflects each shade as if reluctant to let them go. From her courtyard, Neferet watches shadows stretch and soften across the walls. The scent of warmed earth and crushed blossoms hangs in the air. She has not lit the lamp yet. Inside her workroom, the final jars from the day rest in neat rows. A blend of cedar and rosewood sits sealed with a new wax stamp. A trial infusion of orange blossom and fig leaf settles slowly in oil, the petals turning translucent with time. She makes no more today. There are no orders to fulfill, only stillness. Only memory. The box the queen gave her sits unopened on her bench, not from forgetfulness but reverence. When she finally opens it, the lid moves with the softness of aged hinges. Inside is a single object, a vial of translucent green stone, carved with a subtle spiral around its neck. Ancient, heavy, beautiful, a vessel made, not just to hold scent but to protect it. Beneath it lies a folded square of linen with writing inked in the queen's hand. "For the scent that will carry me into memory. Let it rest here until that day." Neferet presses the cloth to her heart. She sets the vial among her sacred tools. Outside, a knock sounds at the gauging tool, not urgent. When she opens it, she finds Capu standing there, dusty from errands but smiling. In his hand, he holds a small clay dish with 3 dried citrus peels, curled like petals. "I brought these," he says. "They smelled like your garden." Neferet steps aside, motioning him in. He follows her into the workroom with practiced ease. His eyes take in every detail: the low flame flickering beneath the copper pot, the row of fresh herbs drying near the window, the faint shimmer of oil in a half-mixed bowl. She hands him a jar and a wooden pestle. "Start with these," she says. "Crush them slowly. Let them speak first." He works in silence, and Neferet does, too. Together, they move through the final hour of the day, not as master and student, but as two listeners to the same song. Later, as the stars bloom across the sky, they sit in the courtyard. She pours each of them a cup of chilled barley drink, and they sip it without conversation. Capu glances upward. "Do you ever think about what scents the stars might have?" he asks. Neferet smiles. "All the time." Capu leans back against the wall. "Maybe the scent of the past is up there. Every old thing, drifting, waiting to fall again." She nods. "Or maybe what we create here rises to meet it, one blend at a time." A breeze moves through the lemon tree. Neferet closes her eyes. She remembers her first oilzia ones her mother wore, the ones her teacher made her memorize, the ones she crafted for the temple, for the dead, for the queen. Each one not just a scent, but a time, a place, a person. Perfume was never just aroma, it was presence. It was what lingered after the moment had passed. And now, as she listens to the soft breath of the night, she knows her work is not finished. It will never be. For as long as someone mixes resin and oil, as long as someone learns to smell with more than their nose, her legacy will remain. Not carved in stone, but carried in air. The scent of warm myrrh beneath the moon, the trace of blue lotus on folded cloth, the perfume of memory itself. She opens her journal one last time and writes, "I was here, I listened, I blended the unseen, and the world, for a moment, remembered." She sets the pen aside. In the quiet, Kapu has drifted to sleep, his hands folded, his face soft with dreams. Neferet does not wake him. Instead, she rises, moves through her workshop, and gently closes each jar, one by one. Outside, Thebes breathes, and somewhere in the dark, a single scent lingers faint, eternal, waiting to be remembered again.